I have to tell you, this was a conversation I did not expect to have, even as much as a week ago. But we've got to talk about S&P 7,000. Had a conversation with the one and only Dan Berg yesterday. He says it's an 80% chance we tick above 7,000 sometime this year. And of course, that means I got to talk with Taylor from Life Goal Investments. Talk about this reality that 7,000 could happen. But also at the end, we'll ask him his chances. Maybe not as high as that. Taylor, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great. 80% to 7,000. So what's that, a 12 to 15% move from here, somewhere in that ballpark?
Yeah, 12 and a half, 13, something like that from here. Yeah.
Right on.
In the next 6 months.
That puts it at a grand total of 18 or so for the year. So that's a heck of a year.
Especially when you step back and realize the last 2 years were over 20%, right? I went back and looked at history. We have had 1 3-year run like that before, but only one.
In the late 90s?
In the late 90s, yeah. Other times we've had 2 back-to-back years of 20% plus. It's been a down year. But we have been here before, so hey, you never know. So I guess stepping back for a minute and just looking at the chessboard, it's a lot less chaotic today. I mean, if you step back a month ago, we had the threat of tariffs, the Iran-Israeli thing, the big, beautiful bill was going to add. I mean, there's all kinds of negativity kind of on the market. But as we keep stepping, and again, I've said all year, right, by July 20th, all this nonsense has got to be behind us. Otherwise, the midterms are lost. It's getting a lot clearer, and I would argue a lot prettier today. What do you think?
Yeah. I think that the Iran-Israel move by Trump was the ultimate chess piece. And they are doing an amazing job of taking a victory lap and seemingly almost with a little more humble nature, as much as that word is not necessarily usually reflective of Trump. But I think he's actually done a good job of not pounding his chest so much to annoy people. And that was an amazing chess move because the importance of it was he won a massive share of the U.S. population with that move. And that makes this big, beautiful bill more likely to be passed, right? Because now if you're a senator and your constituents are back home really trumped up right now, and you say, hey, I'm out on this, all of a sudden now you start to get the axing block closer and closer to your head.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I think is really going on that just again, it's becoming clearer or less volatile is all of the tariff negotiations. Again, it really does feel like we're close to the finish line on several important ones. Obviously, in the last 48 hours, we stopped negotiating with Canada. Canada, weakened on some digital thing, and now we're negotiating again. It seems like a lot of tariff negotiations are going our way, which means results will come in. And again, once those, uncertainties are resolved, it's just more good news.
Yeah, I don't know that I perfectly align with you on that. I think that there's still so much. I think that the rhetoric and the headline has died down, but we've got 2 deals in place. That's the reality. We've got 2 of 88 deals in place, and we've got about a week and a half to get the remainder. Now, I know it's not a drop dead date of July, and that was July 9th was the date that when you push 90 days, that's where you wound up. And I think likely it just gets continued to push further out in the future. It's interesting, the narrative there has massively shifted. But when you speak to some important market constituents, the Fed, they don't take it quite as lightly as the market's taking it right now. They think that there's going to be meaningful inflationary pressures in the summer months. And that's a direct quote from them.
No, absolutely. I think that's one of the big things coming up. Next week, we're going to get that, for that CPI reading, and it's going to be a really important one because, again, the Fed is kind of in a hard spot. They said inflation was coming. It didn't show up last month. Probably a little early. I mean, again, just looking at it. But, if inflation doesn't show up, I mean, they're going to be looking late. I mean, the tagline, the Fed's late, is going to be real. But to your point, when I looked at the data, I've been warning about July and August for 6 months. Right. Not because of tariffs, but because of the base effect, right? The July CPI reading last month was a negative 0.1. So anything above that is going to make CPI go up. I mean, that's just how it works, right?
And maybe the Fed's got that confidence in their back pocket to say, like, listen, we know how this stuff's calculated. We're no dummies. So we're really confident it's going to go higher just because the fact is anything moves it higher now. But it's interesting, like the whole tariff thing. Tariffs are on for 5 minutes, then delayed, and everyone's at 10% now. So do we really anticipate seeing a meaningful impact by a 10% tariff? Is that the thought process as to why the Fed is so staunch in their opinion that inflation is going higher, backing out the base effect? Mm-hmm. Is it that 10%? Because reality is going forward, like, does everyone just maintain a 10% stance and that's where things shake out? Or are there places that are misbehaviors, if you will, in the eyes of our government that get slapped harder because that tariff effect isn't going to take place for another several months now?
Yeah, I think when this all comes to be, I think you're onto something. I think most of the countries, and you could define most however you would like, are going to get hit with 10%. And the other thing you have to realize is people hear 10%, but they don't realize that's only on goods imports. If you step back and look at the national GDP, goods imports make up about 11 or 12% of our economy. Because again, we're a service-based economy. Tariffs don't impact services. So again, it sounds bad, and people might intellectually think, "Oh my God, 10% means everything goes up 10%." That's not how it works. It's going to be small. The other thing,
I think on the margin is what people see. On the margin, it pushes prices higher. Like that. That's just direct math. There's no confusing that. But the boogeyman of inflation is so real in people's minds. It really is. Like, we just came through a nasty bout of inflation. It was the first one in almost a half century. So it is very, very a touchy topic, and anything that's going to drive inflation higher in any way, shape, or form is why people are scared to death of that inflationary boogeyman.
Well, again, I'll read you a quote from Scott Bessent on Bloomberg this morning. It says, "The Fed failed the American people." That hurts. That's ouch. "The Fed failed American people in 22. They seem a little frozen at the wheel." You think that's true?
I think it is true. I've been a proponent of saying they can start cutting sooner than later for the entirety of this year. And I've been pretty staunch in that assertion. But if you do have the mandate the Fed has, and you are trying to be cautious and just incredibly responsible to not effing up, it's hard to make the argument that they should have cut at this point, right? I think the numbers don't tell you they should have already cut. If you're trying to play forecaster, which is kind of what I guess I'm trying to do in that shape, I think there's very good reason to cut. But if you're just going by the mandate, and what history has told them to do is stay until you can see the whites of the eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because again, we've got a lot of important data in the next 2 weeks. This is obviously job week with JOLTS report coming tomorrow, ADP Wednesday, and Bureau of Economic Statistics on Thursday. Shout out 4th of July and Friday. And then we got CPI next week. I think the jobs, because again, we got Christopher Waller and Michelle Bowman saying July rate cut, not only possible, but maybe even probable in their eyes. I would think all three jobs numbers got to be weak this week, because where I sit, if the job market is solid and inflation goes up, you can't cut. You just can't. So the only way to get a cut in July is these next three jobs reports, which are tomorrow, the next day, and the next day, have to be weak and probably pretty weak.
They do. I completely agree with you on that. And I don't know that it's in the cards. I really don't. That meaningful weakness in the jobs market is there. These things, they don't happen overnight. The economy doesn't turn from decent to terrible in a 45-minute blink of an eye. It's just not the way it works. So they incrementally move. And then at some point, they do hit this point of inflection. They snap higher, if that's going to be where it goes. They move higher, bang, they explode higher. But we just don't see that consistent trend of weakening that scares employers to say, all right, we're out. Employers are labor hoarding. They just went through this inflationary pressure back in 2022 where they could not find a soul to fill a job. They had to steal the neighbor's employee that cost them 50% higher than it should have costed them. They're willing to sit on their hands, even if everyone's not fully exacerbated, if everyone's not fully all go at their company. They're willing to let some weakness and some drag play out there before cutting and then having to go through that process again. It is a hassle as a business owner to bring on someone and train them. Find the right candidates, bring them on, train them. 6 months maybe into it, they're incredibly productive unless they were doing an extremely similar role in their old, at their old spot. So labor hoarding is real, and it's taking place right now. We are in a no fire, no hire type environment right now.
Yeah, that's why I've been telling people look at continuous claims, because I don't think the unemployment rate is going to skyrocket like past recessions. It's going to be continuing claims, which is knocking on the door of 2 million. And, I think ultimately it gets all the way to 3 million. So we've got a lot of room to go in that from my perspective. But again, we're talking S&P 7,000. The stock market, as we know, is always a forward-looking indicator. We've got folks like Morgan Stanley saying no cut in July, no cut in September, but 7 cuts after that. The stock market's going to start pricing in cuts. That's going to help a lot of companies. We obviously have the Mag 7 doing okay. They don't need help. But S&P 493, significantly lower rates is going to allow them to borrow again, refi some debt. Maybe, it's going to weaken the dollar. And certainly if you're in, somebody who exports, a weaker dollar helps the bottom line. It's, what do you think? Does 7,000 feel even in the realm of possibilities in 2025?
Not to me. No, I'll take the under. 80% at 7,000 seems absurd to me. But
do you think there's zero? Do you think it's non-zero?
I think it's darn near zero.
Okay.
To get what is it? Again, I don't know the specific math as of today.
Call it 13%.
13%. So it's not zero. Let's be clear on that. But it's a sub 10% chance that it happens. I would make the argument the rate cuts are already priced. So if you look at the last quarter, from the end of the first quarter until today, and by the way, the end of the first quarter was not when we had hell in a handbasket tariffs impacted. That happened right after.
Correct.
So at the end of the first quarter, you've got the S&P up about 10% from the end of the first quarter until today. Mm-hmm. So that's been the move. And at the same time, earnings estimates have contracted for the year by 4.5%. That is rate cuts being priced in. And so how much further can they get priced in? I don't know the answer to that. But right now the market sits at just north of 22 times forward earnings expectations. And price to earnings ratios, think of them like gravity. So as they get higher and higher, someone gets heavier and heavier, the gravitational pull by Earth is more significant. Sure. So it's harder for them to continue to push higher, the higher they get away from their average, which is about 17. So we're at 22 times right now. The average is 17. And the other thing is big man fall hard, right? So when you do have something that trips up and something hits this unexpected point, you get a big pressure downwards. And so fundamentals don't necessarily, drive a higher stock price from here in the broad market, and nor do technicals. So the technicals, the momentum is working right now, but momentum works, and there's this thing called relative strength index, RSI. Mm-hmm. And RSI typically oscillates between 70 on the high end and 30 on the low end. And when it's at 30 or it breaches 30, it's a really good buying opportunity because it means things are oversold. When it's at 70, it means things are overbought. And right now we sit right at 70. And so the technicals from that standpoint of just looking at RSI as one simple thing to look at, say overbought market, the fundamentals really make the hard case to make the play to say, hey, things are going to continue to go higher from here. And, old man Buffett's sitting around going, you youngsters, chase this stuff around, see if you can get out on time. I'll sit over here and wait for the right opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's sitting in cash. Treasury's making, 4 or 5%, whatever it is. I guess the last thing to throw out here that on at least that I'm watching is I saw a stat over the weekend that is it like $7.3 or $7.2 trillion in money market accounts?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of dry powder. Wow.
It is. And so I've dug in on this one because the number just seems absurdity, right?
It does, right? That's crazy.
So big. But in actuality, when you back out and you look at the ratio of money market to GDP, money market to overall wealth of a household, et cetera, right on top of average. So although it's all-time highs because household family wealth is all-time highs.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you step back and look at family wealth, a lot of that is home equity, obviously. But the thing about money market accounts, at least as I understand it, you can't game that, right? It's really cold, hard cash.
Yep. It's the thing about money markets. At our firm, we have this tongue-in-cheek way of speaking to people and saying, listen, cash, money markets are cash. Cash, money markets, T-bills, short-term treasuries, et cetera. Cash is for purchases. right? And so that is what that's there for. Now it's not utilized that way in broad form. People view cash as a risk buffer. And so the reality is, though, when you have a risk buffer, you know that is going to be a riskless asset that's always going to underperform over time. So if you can find a way to get it to work in a way that's not going to add just demonstrably to a level of risk of your portfolio, it's probably a good idea.
All right. I like it. Well, Taylor, do me a favor. Where can people find you?
Yeah, find us at Life Goal Investments. We're on Instagram, on TikTok, doing daily videos.
There you go. Again, follow him on Instagram. I still have no idea how he gets so much inside of 60 seconds, but he does it each and every day. You go follow him. Send him a note thanking him for coming on one rental at a time. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Michael.